Let's start with the Atlanta Hawks. It's a C.
Mm-hmm. I gave him a C minus.
I would have a C minus as well. This is a team that coming into the season, there was, I think, some hopefulness that they could, maybe sneak into that 6th seed potentially as like a ceiling, but definitely playing team. Especially last year, they took Boston to 6 in the first round. Trae Young was fantastic, and now you're sitting here. Fast forward a year, and the biggest rumor around your team is trading your best player, Trae Young. Yeah, that's got to hurt if you're a Hawks fan. So it's hard to give this any higher than like a C minus.
I would give it a C. I just think they could have made moves at the deadline. I think they kind of were reaching for or trying to get too much for Dejounte Murray. I think at that point you should have just moved him for whatever quality you can get for him. You got a lot of players that are good, but they're kind of hindering the young players. Griffin just got sent to the G League. Onyeka still comes off the bench. Jalen Johnson has been great for them in his own right. You're possibly going to trade Trae Young. Like, this is just, you have done a poor job of building this roster post Eastern Conference Finals appearance when they made it with Trae Young. You have not put the right guys around Trae Young. You've completely botched what you have with a superstar player. And now you sat at another deadline and you made 0 moves yet again. So definitely, we being nice. It really should be a D. But, I'm cool with giving them a C.
I only gave them a C minus and not a D because they have two things that at least intrigue me. Trae Young being one of the best point guards in the Eastern Conference, and he's just been a superstar in his own right, where he is one of the sole reasons why they are a respectable offense. He really is the sole reason that they are as efficient as they are. Because you look on the opposite side, their defense is atrocious, and given circumstance, you could argue this is the worst defense in the NBA because they have talented players. They're simply just not playing like it. You have Capella, you have Onyeka Okongwu, who, yes, I know just got injured and he's going to miss some time, and Clint Capella in his own right has missed a couple of games too. But you give up the 3rd most points in the paint with 2 of the better bigs, let me not say 2 of the better bigs, but you understand what I'm saying. In terms of depth, there are not many teams that have the luxury to have 2 bigs. Onyeka Okongwu has not been good this season. Extremely disappointing. So for that to be the case, it really is very telling on what the Atlanta Hawks are doing right now in terms of just sheer will or drive to want to be great. But 10th in the East, 11th in offensive rating. Again, like I mentioned, that's because of Trae Young. 29th in defensive rating, 21st in net rating. And the other positive I would give them is Jalen Johnson and his emergence, his ability to get a basket, to play make, which I think is an underrated quality of his. Rebounding, of course, the defensive side of the ball. They have 2 players that you can look at and think, hey, these could be the 2 pieces for our young core that we can move on with the future. But like Joel mentioned, they're already flirting with the idea of trading Trae Young. It's speaking volumes on the trajectory of this roster right now. So if you wanted to give him a D, I can understand, but I feel like Trae Young and Jalen Johnson alone, I feel like I have to keep him in the C range.
What else could the Hawks have done to build around Trae Young? I look at the Hawks roster, top to bottom, it's a talented team. I think a lot of those players on those teams would go to other teams and they would be highly impactful role players on those teams. I look at the coach, Quinn Snyder, I think he's a good coach.
Not a bad coach.
He's a good coach. Usually, when teams get stuck in the middle, they don't draft well. When the Hawks traded down with the Mavericks and they removed their right to draft Luka, they drafted Trae and they got 2 first-round picks, so they got a first-round pick. They drafted Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter in that draft, 2020 draft. The year after, they draft Onyeka Okongwu. The year after, they draft Jalen Johnson. These are good players. Mm-hmm. So I look at the Atlanta Hawks, and I'm wondering why they're not better. What else could they have done to build around Trae Young to where they can compete? I think you have to trade Trae Young because there's no more going up. Mm-hmm. Like, what are they doing wrong? I don't think they're doing much wrong.
They are talented players. I'm sorry, Joe, but real quick, they lack effort on the defensive side of the ball. The players that you named, yet you look at probably DeAndre Hunter, solid defensive player, or had the potential to do that until, of course, injuries have definitely taken a toll on him. You look at Jalen Johnson, he's one of the few that you mentioned that really have solidified themselves on the defensive side of the ball. You didn't mention AJ Griffin, right? You didn't mention AJ Griffin, who, like Riv mentioned, is now in the G League. He's been a relative.
And last year he was solid.
Well, in the few minutes that he did play, in his limited opportunity, he did. And for him to not get that same opportunity this year has definitely been a little disappointing, but it seems like you take a look at that Dejounte Murray move, and that was supposed to be the move that moved the needle for them on the defensive side, and it hasn't.
That's what screwed them up, is trading for Dejounte Murray. I mean, at the time, we thought it was a solid deal because of how great Dejounte was as a defender with San Antonio. But I don't want to call it all of their eggs in one basket because it's not like, they traded 5 or 7 first-round picks, but they gave up. That was basically his running mate.
Oh, yeah.
Like you go get the number 2, like Luka's number 2 now is Kyrie over LeBron and AD. You always get that number 2 that you want to grow this team with. They chose Dejounte Murray, and it's clear that he's not a good fit with Trae.
I think it might be that, and it's not a knock on Trae, but Trae just can't be the best player on the championship team.
It's going to be tough.
I think when you think of an ideal partner to pair with him, why do we love the idea of him going to San Antonio? Because we know Wembanyama's going to be better than him, and we know Wembanyama's going to be one of the top players in the world.
I don't think
soon.
I think it's I think it's
yes
a 50-50.
and no. Yeah,
I think it's
your
'cause
statement's right, but also I don't agree fully.
You need an anchor defensively,
Yes.
especially when you have a guard that is hindered on that end. And
Correct.
I think even there was flirtations with Trae Young possibly playing with like I feel like a couple years ago people thought like him and AD would be a great
That's
combination.
the best pairing.
Still can
That's
happen.
what I'm saying. You need like same thing with Steph Curry. Like you need an anchor that can anchor the defense to where he can anchor the offense. Because if you have a bunch of players offensively that can help him, but you don't have a bunch of defensive players that can do what he cannot, then the team is just gonna look funky. And this team doesn't have any. It was supposed to be Dejounte, but Dejounte's not a defensive anchor. He's a guy who can help your defense, and he did that with San Antonio. He helped, but they had anchors. They don't have that in Atlanta. So it just, I don't know if that Trae Young, I don't think can be the best player in the championship team, but I also think like he also needs to play with the right guys to maybe contend for a championship.
And I'm not blaming Trae Young for the Hawks' struggles. I think Trae Young has been phenomenal this year. His defense has really improved. So he's doing everything he possibly can to make sure the Hawks are a good team. They're just not a good team, but I think it just speaks to the ceiling of what Trae Young can be if he's the best player on your team. It's just very, very difficult.